Hello, best friends, and welcome back to our safe little space. I hope your week is going well, that you are going well, and thank you for coming back to hang out with me, like voluntarily. That's so nice. Oh, hi. Hello. Have you come to say hi too? Did you want to say hi too? Oh. I've been trying to teach Lily to speak all week. Lily girl, did you just speak? Can you speak? The mic's there. You want to say hi? No. Okay. That was short-lived. If you are new here, hi, hello, my name is Liz, and I'm so glad you randomly stumbled across this video. If you're into things like true crime and unsolved mysteries, then you should totally stick around for a while. Maybe even hit the subscribe button, and you and me can be like best friends. Forever. If you want. So yeah, I hope you guys are well. I hope you're enjoying the start of the spooky season. As you can see, Lily is totally excited and prepared with her cute little pumpkin bandana that I just cannot get enough of. And she totally put it on voluntarily, and I did not force her to wear it at all. I swear it was totally voluntary. She's giving me such bad evils right now. So in celebration of it being October, we are of course switching it up and going Halloween style because I feel like as a very small part of the true crime genre of YouTube, I'll get in trouble if I don't. That's just the vibe I get. So we are going to explore the true story that inspired the movie The Exorcist. So to give you some background, I have seen The Exorcist exactly one time as a full-grown adult because God knows there is no way I ever would have been allowed to watch that under my mother's roof. And that one time was enough. If I'm honest, full disclosure, I did not rewatch the movie as part of my preparing for this video, even though it's been a good few years and my memory is a little bit foggy. I went to watch it and then I was just like, no, I can't do it. And that's coming from someone that genuinely enjoys horror movies. Personally, I just feel that watching The Exorcist is one of those life experiences that only really needs to happen once. If you think about it, you always hear people talking about how The Exorcist is the scariest movie of all time, but have you ever heard anyone say that it's their favorite movie of all time? No, and there's a reason for that. And you guys can feel free to challenge me in the comments. Honestly, if The Exorcist is your favorite movie of all time, I would love to know so that I can avoid you if I ever cross you in the street. Just kidding. Just kidding. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to assume that all of you have seen The Exorcist or at least some of it and that we're all on the same page. It's terrifying in a way that words can't fully convey. Just in case it's been a few years for you as well, though, I will just give you a quick synopsis of the film just to jog your memory a little bit. Warning, this synopsis will include spoilers for those of you who haven't seen the movie yet but plan to sometime in the future. The movie's only been out for about 50 years, but I'm still watching out for you, okay? The movie centers around a 12-year-old girl named Reagan, who was played by Linda Blair, and despite always having been a pretty normal, happy young girl, Reagan starts doing things like swearing and lying. She wets herself and threatens one of her mother's friends at a party, and this then escalates into pretty violent behavior. There's bed shaking, Linda's thrashing around, there's just stuff flying everywhere all around her room. So her mother, Chris, played by Ellen Burstyn, takes Reagan to a bunch of doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, a whole bunch of them, examine Reagan, put her through a whole bunch of tests, but they don't find anything wrong with her. Chris becomes desperate as Reagan's behavior worsens. There's one particular scene with a crucifix that really bothers her. If you know, you know. And she eventually reaches out to a priest, Father Karras, who starts off as skeptical, but after seeing some crazy stuff going on with Reagan with his own eyes, he contacts the Catholic Church for permission to perform an exorcism, and they send help in the form of Father Merrin. The two priests begin the exorcism ritual, and there are some horrible, terrifying things that go on. Regan is saying some very lewd, disturbing things to the priests. It's not her fault. She's possessed by the devil, but there is a reason this movie got an R rating. But in the end, the exorcism is successful. Kind of. Father Merrin dies from a heart attack, like mid-exorcism, and the devil ends up leaving Regan but going into Father Karras, who then throws himself out a window and goes down this big flight of stairs and also dies. But it's all sunshine and rainbows for little Regan and her mother Chris, who get to go on and live their lives without the devil. Best synopsis ever, I know. The Exorcist was released on the 26th of December 1973, and it was just an instant hit. A lot of people lined up multiple times in the December cold to be able to go and see it at theatres, and the reactions in the theatres were pretty intense. There were people crying, there were people throwing up, there were people passing out, like it was mayhem. But did you know that William Peter Blatty, the producer and screenwriter of the film and the author of the novel that the film was based on, drew inspiration from an actual real life exorcism? Because I didn't. I only found out this week when I watched the documentary, The Exorcism of Roland Doe, which I was watching because Halloween. It turns out that Blatty first found out about the exorcism of Roland Doe way back in 1949 when he read about it in a newspaper article, but he put it on the back burner for like 2 decades until he started writing the novel The Exorcist. And it's Roland's story that we're going to be talking about today. Roland Doe is a pseudonym. It wasn't the boy's real name. It was just, seeing as he was only 13 years old when all of this occurred, it was decided that his true identity would be protected and that his real name would never be revealed. Roland has also been referred to as Robbie and R, and his real name has actually been exposed in more recent years, but we're still going to call him Roland because that's what he was known as for so long. And our story begins in January 1949 in a small, quiet suburb called Cottage City in Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. So Roland was a 13-year-old boy. He was an only child, and he was just your normal, average, typical teenage boy. He was said to be a little bit of a loner. He was said to be a little bit spoiled, which doesn't come that much of a surprise with the whole only child territory. And it was said that he could be a bit quiet, but also a bit hyper at times. But generally speaking, he had some friends, he was doing okay in school, just a very normal boy. Roland lived with his parents, who were both very religious. They were evangelical Lutherans, and also his grandmother, who was a strict Catholic. And he got along just fine with his parents and his grandmother. They were quite close, but he was really close with his Aunt Harriet, who the family called Aunt Tilly. And something Roland and Tilly really bonded over was Tilly's passion for spiritualism, because in stark comparison to Roland's parents and grandmother, Tilly loved all things spiritual. We're talking ghosts, spirits, talking to the dead, tarot cards, astrology, all of that. And so when Aunt Tilly went and got herself a talking board, what we refer to today as a Ouija board, Roland and Tilly loved using it together, trying to talk to their dead relatives, all of that fun stuff. And they ended up using it quite a lot. Apparently, Roland would also spend a lot of hours on his own playing with the Ouija board because he wanted to master it and impress his Aunt Tilly by becoming like a proper pro at speaking with the dead. And a lot of people point at this almost obsession Roland had with the Ouija board as maybe the cause of all of the events that occurred thereafter, wondering if maybe he had accidentally opened some kind of spiritual door and something bad had gotten inside. So one day in January 1949, Roland's parents go out and leave Roland alone with his grandmother. And not long after they leave, Roland and his grandmother start hearing this weird dripping sound, like this constant drip, drip, drip. And so they go around the house and check all the faucets, but nothing's leaking. So they continue looking, trying to figure out where the hell this dripping is coming from. And they realize slowly that it's coming from the grandmother's bedroom. So they go inside, they stand there for a minute, and then all of a sudden, as they're standing, there's a picture of Jesus on the wall, right? And it starts shaking right before their eyes, as though something behind the wall is pounding against it, trying to knock it down. As if this wasn't terrifying enough, they start hearing this weird scratching sound coming from the floorboards near the grandmother's bed. And this scratching continues after Roland's parents come home and then for days after that. And it gets louder between like 7 p.m. and midnight, and then even louder again when they stamp on the floor. And so Roland's family is like, fantastic, we have rats. And so his dad calls an exterminator who comes out and has a look around, but he's like, you don't have rats. I can't find anything. But the scratching continues. And over the time of a couple of weeks, it actually moves from the grandmother's room to Roland's room. It's around this period on the 26th of January that really suddenly Aunt Tilly sadly passes away from complications from multiple sclerosis. And she was only 54. It was really sudden and unexpected. So Roland, of course, is heartbroken. He's distraught. And there's this one night where he, his mother, and his grandmother are all laying in his bed in his bedroom. I imagine trying to get a distraught Roland to sleep. You know, he's just lost his aunt that he was super close with. And while all three of them are lying there in the bed, they start hearing this sound. And it sounds like troops marching across the floor towards the bed and then pacing the length of the mattress and back again. And they're all terrified, but Roland's grandmother eventually cries out, "Tilly, if that's you, knock 3 times." And sure enough, there's 3 distinct knocks that are so forceful that it sends like gusts of air against the 3 of them. And so Roland's mother is like, "Tilly, if that is really you, knock 4 times." And there's 4 knocks. And then claw marks appear on the mattress. Now, I would not even be in the room at this point. Like, as soon as those footsteps started, I would have been out of there so fast. But Roland's mother and grandmother are apparently total badasses, because not only are they still there, but they ignore or don't even acknowledge these claw marks. And that apparently pisses off whatever it is that they're communicating with, because shit gets real quick. All 3 of them watch in horror as a bedsheet straight up just stands up on its own with no one touching it. And Roland's bed starts just violently shaking. And this is something that would continue. Over the course of the next month or so, Roland's bed would just violently shake every time he tried to go to bed for the night. Like, it's bouncing around everywhere. And there's other scary occurrences as well, where things like fruit and food and Bibles even go flying across the room when Roland's there. There's this one instance where Roland is just sitting peacefully in this rocking chair in the living room, and it just starts spinning wildly out of his control. And then this stuff starts happening at school as well. Roland's books are flying everywhere. His desk is shaking and straight up sliding across the floor like a plate on a Ouija board. But Roland's teachers don't believe him. They think he's just acting up for attention. So poor Roland gets no support, and eventually it gets to the point where he just stops going to school. Hey, poor Roland, right? Would you have believed Roland? Are you trying to show off your bandana? It does look cute. I love it. So Roland is now not going to school, and his family obviously no longer believe that this is just his Aunt Tilly trying to connect with him from the other side, because there's no way she would torment him like this. So Roland's parents take him to a doctor. They're thinking maybe he has epilepsy, but the doctor checks him over. He finds nothing wrong, and he's like, no, the symptoms don't match up with epilepsy. So they then go to a psychologist, to a psychiatrist, and the feedback they're getting is coming back all the same. There's nothing mentally or physically wrong with Roland. One of the psychiatrists they take him to says that he's a little high strung, sure, but he's totally normal. And there's no condition that any of these people can come up with that matches Roland's symptoms. But meanwhile, at home, things are getting so much worse. Not only is there the bed shaking, the things flying around the room, Roland will now frequently wake up in the middle of the night out of a deep sleep, thrashing around, contorting, and shouting and barking in a voice that doesn't sound like his own, so loudly that the neighbors can hear all of this going on. And then the scratches start appearing. Oh, it's getting intense. I can feel myself getting flushed now. Too much, too much. So at night, while poor Roland is writhing around and screaming in pain, these scratches start appearing on his skin all over his body as if they're made by claws. And I know what you're thinking, but Roland's parents watch these scratches appear while his hands are down by his side and in plain view. And some of the scratches are on his back where he can't reach, so they're not self-inflicted. So his parents are obviously beside themselves. They've gone through the traditional routes of sending Roland to doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and they've received little to no help. So they decide it's time to reach out to their church, and they contact a man named Reverend Schultz. And Schultz, coming into this, he's skeptical. He sends Roland to another mental hygiene clinic for more testing, but all the tests come back all clear. So Schultz thinks, well, maybe it's poltergeists messing with Roland. And seeing as poltergeists don't tend to move from house to house, Schultz is like, well, let's have Roland stay a night at my house and we'll see if anything happens. So Roland's parents agree. Roland goes to Schultz's house, and during the day, he's a perfectly normal, happy boy. He's chatting away, talking about what he wants to be when he's older. But sure enough, bedtime comes, the lights go out, and whatever has a hold on Roland is back to its old tricks. His mattress starts shaking and sliding all over the ground, and so Schultz ties Roland to an armchair in the room. This seems a bit dramatic to me. I feel like there were a few steps in there that he might have skipped, but anyway, he ties Roland to an armchair, and this armchair gets shoved over, like it's been pushed, and Roland topples over. And then Schultz starts praying, as you do, and this just seems to piss off whatever this thing is, and the scratches start appearing on Roland's skin once again. So the next morning, when Roland's parents turn up to pick him up, Schultz says, yeah, so there's definitely something going on with Roland, but as a Lutheran minister, this is kind of beyond me, out of my field of expertise. So you're going to have to go to the Catholic Church because this is kind of their jam, you know? So they take Roland to see a priest named Father Hughes. And according to, I guess we'll say legend, Father Hughes later said that when Roland was brought into his office that day, the temperature in the room just instantly dramatically dropped. And during the meeting, his phone just went casually sliding across the desk, and Roland is sitting there swearing at him and saying things along the lines of, "Oh, priest of hell, why do you bother me?" Fun. So after this meeting, Father Hughes talks to Roland's parents, and he's like, yeah, not only is Roland possessed, but he's possessed by the devil himself. And he thinks it happened because Roland was playing with the Ouija board with Aunt Tilly, and he just opened up a door that he shouldn't have. So with Roland's parents' permission, Father Hughes goes through the process of getting Roland an exorcism. And so he speaks with the Archbishop in Washington, and he's like, yeah, hi, I've got this 13-year-old boy that's possessed by the devil and needs an exorcism yesterday. Is that okay with you? The Archbishop gives the go-ahead, and so Father Hughes checks Roland in under a fake name to Georgetown Hospital so that he can carry out the exorcism in a secure environment where if things go south, there's medical assistance right there on hand. So once in the hospital, Roland is tied down with restraints to the bed, and Hughes goes to begin the exorcism. But everything comes to an abrupt halt when Roland gets free of one of the restraints, grabs a spring from the mattress, and slashes Hughes' arm all the way from his shoulder to his wrist, resulting in a wound that requires 100 stitches. It's said that Father Hughes was never the same after this experience, that he became withdrawn from the church, that he became a shell of his former self. He got blood poisoning and suffered ongoing serious complications from this wound to his arm for the rest of his life. But I hate to ruin the story, but there's actually a few different versions of Hughes' involvement in Roland's case. The version that I've told you is the most widely accepted, but it's also the most dramatic by far. There's also another version which is much more substantiated with first-hand accounts by people that knew the priest, who said this injury wasn't nearly as bad as everyone makes out, and that Father Hughes was totally fine. He never withdrew from the church and he just went on to live a normal life. And there's yet another version where not only did this arm slashing event never occur, but Hughes never personally met up with Roland. His parents had reached out to Hughes and asked for his advice, and he was in the process of getting permission from the Archbishop to carry out an exorcism, but he never got the chance because Roland and his family all of a sudden just packed up without warning and moved to St. Louis. This move was brought about because Roland's mother, who of course was under tremendous amounts of stress and just beside herself, turned to Roland's dad and said, "Look, we need support to get through all of this. We have family in St. Louis. We should just go," hoping that the strange phenomena that had been occurring wouldn't follow them almost halfway across the country. And then a few nights later, after this conversation took place, the word Lewis appeared in bright red scratches right across Roland's ribs. So Roland's parents were like, "Yeah, that's us." They packed up their whole lives and moved in with family in St. Louis on the off chance that this huge move would somehow bring Roland peace. Unfortunately, though, this absolutely was not the case. Whatever had been tormenting Roland back home followed the family to St. Louis, and every night when Roland tried to go to sleep, there was the bed shaking, there was the scratches, there was Roland thrashing around and contorting. But now, not only was it just his parents and grandmother seeing all of this, there was 2 of his aunts, there was 4 of his uncles and 4 of his cousins witnessing all of this scary, inexplicable stuff, and they're all terrified for Roland and for themselves. So one of Roland's cousins asks her college professor, another priest named Father Bishop, if he can come and see Roland and maybe help in some way. So Bishop goes to the house, sees all of the crazy stuff going on, and immediately calls in reinforcements. He reaches out to a Jesuit priest called Father Bowden, and Bowden comes to the house one night. He says some prayers over Roland, but everything is really calm and chill for like an hour, and so he's probably like, "Why are all these people wasting my time?" But then, like clockwork, of course, crazy stuff starts happening as soon as the lights are out and Roland tries to go to sleep. There is this thud, this really loud thud that everyone hears from downstairs, which turns out to be a bottle of holy water being like flung across the room that hits a wall. And this bookcase, which weighs upwards of about 50 pounds, has been moved across the room and like spun, like it's facing a totally different direction. And of course, there's the scratches and the violent bed shaking. So Father Bowden, just like everyone else, he's come into this situation very skeptical because at this time, we're talking 1949, demon possessions and exorcisms and all of that were just not common practice. They weren't spoken about. So the majority of people, including priests, were just not familiar with it. But after this night where he's been at the house and witnessed firsthand all of this crazy phenomena going on around Roland, he's convinced. He reaches out to the Archbishop in St. Louis and says, "Look, this boy needs an exorcism, but I don't know how to perform one. I haven't been trained in exorcism. So, can you please approve the exorcism and also please send out a priest that does know how to perform one? And I don't know if this archbishop was having a bad day, or maybe he was understaffed, or he didn't take Roland's case very seriously. But his response is, yeah, Roland can have an exorcism, but you need to perform it. I'm not sending anyone else. On top of that, the Archbishop demands that everything is kept top secret. No one is to know about this exorcism. So, to this Archbishop's face, Bowden is like, yep, yeah, okay, no worries. But then to Bishop, he's like, okay, so here's what's really going to happen. You're going to keep a diary, because if someone else is thrown in the deep end like this, hopefully this diary will serve as like a how-to guide for future exorcisms. Kind of like a what to expect when you're expecting, like the parenting handbook, but for exorcisms. Bowden didn't say that. That's just how I'm picturing this diary. And side note, this diary that Bishop kept would actually be what William Peter Blatty used as his main inspiration for The Exorcist decades later. And so Bowden, even though he has exactly zero experience in exorcisms, he does a ton of research. He brushes up on the book The Roman Ritual, which is essentially like the Catholic exorcism handbook. It's filled with prayers and rituals and all of that. And he's like, okay, let's get this show on the road. Let's do this. I don't think he said it like that though. Hello. They're getting ready. You ready for the exorcism? Are you ready? I don't know if I'm ready. Are you ready? FYI, that was not a ghost. That was Lily. You're crazy. She's laying down like right in front of me now, like front row seats for this exorcism. So at about 10:30 p.m. on the 16th of March, 1949, Bowden and Bishop make their way to Roland's house in St. Louis to begin the exorcism process. And Bowden actually brings along another priest, a Father O'Halloran, who is a young seminary student. And Halloran thinks he's there as like a favor to drive Bowden to the house and then wait in the car. This was something he often did as like a good deed because Bowden's vision was getting a bit fuzzy. So that's what he thinks he's there for. And then when they get there, Bowden is like, oh, no, come inside. Not telling him anything about what they were up to. Like, can you imagine? So the three priests get out of the car and walk towards the house to begin the exorcism. And I kind of picture them right now as like The Undertaker in WWE. Is that just me? It's just me. No worries. So the exorcism hasn't even begun yet, and Roland already isn't in the best shape. Like, although during the day he's pretty much a normal kid, he hasn't been eating or drinking a lot. He's been getting little to no sleep, and he's just covered in these awful scratches all over his body. So the exorcism begins, and from the very first lines of the prayers that Bowden reads from the Roman Ritual, shit gets real. According to Bishop's diary, while Roland's hands are in clear view of everyone down by his side, these big, ugly scratches start appearing all over his body. Some of these are deep enough to draw blood, and they appear on his stomach, on his arms and legs, on his back, on his throat. And Roland tells them that it feels like thorns being dragged across his skin. Meanwhile, some of the other marks look and feel more like brands, as though Roland's skin is being branded from the inside. Some of these markings form the word hell across Roland's chest in such a way that if he looks down, he can clearly read it. There's also an imprint that looks like the devil that appears on his leg. And after, thrashing and writhing around during all of this, Roland passes out and the priests continue praying over him. But when they start praying to Saint Michael, Roland suddenly wakes up in a proper rage. For those of you not familiar with St. Michael is an archangel, the Archangel Michael. And in religious teachings, he's often depicted as being like the ultimate hero in good versus evil. In artworks, he's often shown with this very impressive sword, quite literally destroying the devil. So when the priests start praying to St. Michael, Roland starts throwing punches at his pillow, at the headboard of his bed, with what Bishop describes in the diary as more than ordinary strength. And this is the most violent that Roland's family have seen him throughout all of this. And when the priests sprinkle him with like holy water, he comes out of this spell and says that he has been fighting and struggling against this big red devil that he describes as slimy and very powerful. Roland then lapses back into this like oblivious, violent state. He's thrashing around like crazy. It takes 2 men to restrain him, and all of this continues throughout the night. It's not until about 7:30 a.m. the following morning that Roland finally just kind of passes out and goes into a peaceful sleep. Roland wakes up at about 1 p.m. the next afternoon. He has no recollection of what's happened, and he just goes and plays Monopoly with his family. And this would be the pattern that would continue. The priests would arrive each night anywhere between 7 and 10 p.m. Roland would be sent to bed to try and get some sleep, and that's when the bed shaking would begin. The priests would then go in and start the exorcism again, and this would be a battle that lasted all night into the early hours of the next morning, when Roland would hopefully be able to get a little bit of sleep, and when he woke up he had no memory of what had happened and would pretty much be a normal kid during the day. Honestly, whatever it was that had a hold on Roland seemed just merely pissed off at the priest's attempts to exorcise it. Like, it continued on with the activities we've already mentioned, the bed shaking, the scratches, all of that. But then Roland was spitting at the priests with quite surprising accuracy, considering that his eyes were closed. He's also shouting profanities at them, like very nasty, quite often sexual things that everyone around is surprised that this 13-year-old boy knows about. He's snapping his teeth at them and biting the priests if they get too close. And there's this one incident where Roland vomits, and he convinces the priest that by vomiting, he has purged the demon. The demon is gone. And they believe him. They all go home at 1 a.m. like, yay, the demon's gone. But they're then called back just a couple of hours later because Roland is screaming, he's back. And the thrashing and contorting has started all over again. And he's also frequently urinating in the bed and then complaining that the urine is burning his skin. So it's seriously intense. Roland is exhausted. His family is exhausted. Like, they're under some serious strain. His mum has already been sent to the doctor for stress. And so Father Bowden decides it's time to move Roland out of the house where the priest can continue the nightly exorcisms, but with less negative impact on the rest of the family. So they take Roland to the St. Francis Xavier Church at St. Louis University and place him in the rectory. But this change of environment does not help at all. If anything, things are so much worse. Roland is now super strong. It takes 3 men to restrain him. And at one point he breaks free from these men and he straight up takes a swing at Father Halloran and breaks his nose. Like, you remember Halloran, right? The guy that thought he was just doing a good deed and driving Father Bowden around. Yeah, he got his nose broken. And if it's even possible, Roland's dialogue is getting even dirtier. It's just straight up abusive by this point. I can't repeat some of the things that this 13-year-old boy was shouting at these priests. I always thought that the foul language used by Regan when she's possessed in The Exorcist were just thrown in there for like shock value. So everyone would be like, oh my God, it's a little girl. How could she say these things? But no, it's all in there in this diary of Roland Doe's exorcism. Apparently Roland was also a little bit gassy. Halloran later said that Roland's stomach was visibly swollen, and this gas that he's passing is so foul and pungent that even though it's freezing cold outside, all of the windows are open because otherwise the priests straight up cannot breathe in that room. So things continue on this track, right? The nightly exorcisms running from late evening to early morning, but seemingly having no tangible effect whatsoever. So Roland is sent back home to his family. And there's actually a stage here of about 5 days where nothing happens. Roland seems to be back to his old self. There's no disturbances at night, not even bed shaking. So everyone's freaking thrilled, thinking the ordeal is finally over. But we all know it's not over, right? It all starts again this one night when Roland comes downstairs to his parents to say he's not feeling very well. His feet keep getting really, really hot and then really, really cold. And he tells his family and the priests that he wants to write, and so they give him a pencil. And Roland writes a few different things, most notably being, I will stay 10 days and then return after the 4 days are up. I am the devil himself. You will have to pray for a month in the Catholic Church. I will try and get his mother and father to hate the Catholic Church. I will answer in the name of spite. Roland also drew a face and wrote underneath it, Dead Bishop. And it's worth noting here that in the more dramatic versions of this story that I mentioned earlier, people always say that Roland would speak fluent Latin during the exorcisms, despite never having learned the language previously. But if you listen to the priests and their take on it, they always felt that Roland was just mimicking them when he heard them speaking Latin. And sure enough, this night where Roland is doing all of this writing, the priests ask him to write something in Latin, and Roland then goes on and just writes gibberish that isn't even close to Latin. So take from that what you will. Okay, so to give you an idea of the timeline, I know there's been a lot of different nights and exorcisms going on, but we're about 2 weeks in and about 12 exorcisms deep at this point. And Roland's family and the priests decide that the next logical step is to have Roland baptized in a Catholic church. So one night at about 8 p.m., Roland and his family get in the car to go to the church to have him baptized. But on the way, Roland gets in one of his spells and he straight up leaps into the front passenger seat and grabs a hold of the wheel, nearly killing himself and everyone in the car. And during all of this, he is laughing at his family and shouting things at them like, so you think Holy Communion will drive me out? And what's interesting is when Roland goes into these spells, which continue all the way to the church, the car radio stops working, but it works perfectly fine before and after these spells, because that's not creepy at all. By the time they get Roland to the church finally, he is in full-on rage mode. It takes 3 men to drag him into the church. He's thrashing around, he's contorting, screaming, spitting. And so they have to do just like a little baby version of the baptism because it's just not happening. Roland isn't going to sit still for the whole thing. But yet again, this baptism just seems to piss off whatever is inside Roland, because remember how up until this point, despite all of this mess that's happening at night, Roland was a relatively normal kid during the day. Well, now his spells are happening all over the place, 24 hours a day, like it's all free game. It's like 8 a.m. the following morning after the baptism when Roland not only shatters a light bulb, but also the bathroom sink. And then later that day when he's outside playing ball with his dad and his uncles, everything is going fine. And then all of a sudden, Roland starts stumbling like he's drunk and he closes his eyes and just takes off, sprinting super fast across 2 neighbors' lawns, and it takes 3 men to drag him back. That same day, he attacks his aunt, and it takes several different men to pull him off of her. And then that night, he has a new trick where he just chants over and over again at one of his little cousins in this sing-songy voice, "You will die tonight." Hey guys, it's Editing Liz here. So lovely to see you. I just realized while editing this, I stopped calling Father Bowden Father Bowden, and I'm now calling him Father Bowden for the rest of this video. But just so you know, it's the same guy. It's not a new priest. It is the same guy I've been talking about this whole time. So just so we're all on the same page. Peace. So Father Bowden, meanwhile, watching all of this, he is tearing his hair out. He is feeling it. Everyone is. How could you not? He's lost about 40 pounds during this whole ordeal, and he also has boils covering his entire body. And so he decides maybe it's best to take Roland back home to Washington, where hopefully he can find someone to help, maybe a church, maybe a hospital where Roland can receive proper medical treatment, because he's not faring too well either. He's losing weight to the point where he's gaunt, he's depressed, he's quite often unresponsive, even during the periods where he is lucid. But when they go to Washington, no one will help. No one wants to touch Roland's case once Bowden explains it to them. So they have no choice but to go back to St. Louis. And this is when Roland is admitted to the psychiatric ward of the Alexian Brothers Hospital, because the Alexians are the only ones that will take Roland in. They're used to dealing with high pressure cases like this. And this place, to put it simply, is intense. There is bars on the windows, there are restraints on the beds, and there are no doorknobs on the insides of the doors. So if you want to get out of your room, you have to pound on the door and hope like hell that someone will let you out. Like a terrifying place for a 13-year-old boy. The first couple of nights at the hospital are actually pretty low key. Roland sleeps most of the time, it sounds like, because he's probably exhausted. But soon everything starts up again, right? The scratches are back, and worse, some of these scratches stretch all the way from Roland's ankle to his hips. He is spitting, screaming, shouting, barking again, like it's on like Donkey Kong. So these exorcisms are continuing every night. Like clearly these priests are just troopers. And then one day, Father Halloran, if you remember, again, the same Halloran who thought he was literally just doing Father Bowden a favor by driving him around, that Halloran, he decides to take Roland out for the day to this outdoor retreat where they can just walk around and get some fresh air. Great idea. At this outdoor retreat, there are big statues depicting different stations of the cross, or the day that Jesus Christ was crucified, and everything is very peaceful. Halloran and Roland are just walking around looking at these different statues, and then at the statue depicting the 14th station, Roland goes into another one of his spells, and he takes off out of nowhere, sprinting with his eyes closed. You remember that old trick. But now he's not just sprinting across neighbors' lawns, he's sprinting towards a cliff. And luckily, Halloran catches him and tackles him to the ground just in time before he goes off said cliff. Like if Halloran hadn't have been there, Roland would have just poof, run off the cliff and died. So back to the timeline again, we're now a month in. I've lost track of how many exorcisms have gone on, but it's now Easter, the Christian holiday where Jesus Christ was crucified and then rose from the dead 3 days later. So the priests are all on edge. Like I think they're expecting some crazy stuff to happen. But over the Easter weekend, the spirit or demon or devil, whatever is inside Roland, is surprisingly quiet, like suspiciously quiet. Sure, there's like a little bit of drama when they try to get Roland to take Holy Communion, and Roland just can't get through the prayers and the rituals without going into one of his spells. And they tried to get Roland to Mass at the chapel on Easter Sunday, but he was thrashing around, seizing, like spitting, and it just wasn't happening. So there is some drama. But apart from that, Easter goes pretty damn smoothly. And then Easter Monday rolls around and shit hits the fan bright and early at about 8 a.m. Roland's kicking at the staff, the Alexian brothers, and he throws a bottle of holy water at them that so close to hitting their heads, but it smashes on the wall behind them. And then after 2 hours of trying to get Roland to take Holy Communion, according to the diary, the devil laughs at the priests through Roland and tells them that isn't enough. He has to say one word, one little word. I mean, one big word. He'll never say it. He'll never say that word. I am always in him. I may not have much power always, but I am in him. He will never say that word. So what is this word, right? Boden just cannot work it out. After this, Roland goes through this lucid period where he eats some ice cream because apparently ice cream is really the only thing that he's agreed to eat during this whole thing. But then he throws a glass, he throws a plate, they shatter everywhere, and he's just very difficult to deal with for the rest of the afternoon. So at 7 p.m., the priests all rock up, Boden, Bishop, and Halloran, to begin yet another exorcism. Cue the Undertaker theme. Still just me. Cool. So by 9:30 p.m., things are in full swing, but they're also a little bit different because while Roland's spells and seizures that he's suffering are more intense than ever, between them, when he's lucid, he is praying up a storm. He's almost giving the priests a run for their money for how fervent he is. And then just before 11 p.m., Roland goes into yet another one of these spells, but instead of thrashing around like crazy, he is dead still. And he suddenly shouts out in this loud voice, "Satan, I am Saint Michael, and I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave the body in the name of Dominus immediately. Now, now, now." And this Saint Michael, of course, is the same Saint Michael that we mentioned earlier when the exorcisms first begun, when the prayers of the priests to Saint Michael were what Roland reacted most violently to. So after this, Roland goes on to have his most violent seizures yet. He is thrashing around like crazy for about 10 minutes straight. And then all of a sudden, everything just stops. Roland is suddenly lucid and normal, and he smiles at everyone in the room and says, he's gone. And he goes on to explain to them what he saw during all of his thrashing around. He says that he was standing outside a cave and he saw this beautiful man wearing this close-fitting robe with flowing wavy hair blowing in the breeze. And I swear to you, this is not me in bored housewife mode trying to turn this into an erotic novel. This is almost all word for word what is in the diary, what Roland says he saw, okay? It's not me. It's Roland. Anyway, this beautiful man, he is bathed in light and he's got this big fiery sword. And when he sees Roland, he points down to the cave. And so Roland has a look and he sees the devil in the cave. And the man, clearly Saint Michael, the Archangel Michael, then turns to Roland and smiles and speaks to him. But the only word that Roland hears is Dominus. Now, Dominus is a Latin word which translates to Lord, and it turns out that this is the word that the devil said that Roland would never use. So in that outburst back there, when Roland had shouted out the word Dominus, he saw the devil and all of his little demon friends run into the cave and out of sight. And then suddenly bars appeared over the entrance of the cave and letters appeared on these bars spelling out the word spite, which I find interesting because remember all the way back at Roland's relative's house when he had that writing phase, one of the phrases he had written was, "I will answer in the name of spite." So Father Boden, he is listening to all of these things that Roland is saying, and he is skeptical that the devil is really gone for good. So he prays to God saying, if this is for real, if the devil's really gone, please give me a sign. And just like that, according to multiple witnesses in the hospital at the time, there is this massive boom that you can hear throughout the whole building. There's also multiple reported sightings of this huge glowing image of St. Michael seen in the chapel at the same time as this boom. So Father Bowden is like, thank you, God. Fantastic. The devil is gone. But was he? Because a rumor came up later that maybe the devil just moved houses, specifically to one of the priests or Alexian brothers present, and that this man then spent the rest of his life locked up in the hospital being tormented by the devil. Seeing as the hospital was torn down in 1978 and there's no real hard evidence to back up any of this, it's hard to tell if this rumor affected the ending of the movie, The Exorcist, where the devil jumps from Reagan to Father Karras, or if the ending of the movie affected the story of Roland Doe's exorcism over the years. Like, it's a bit of a, chicken or the egg kind of deal. After the exorcism, Roland and his family stayed in St. Louis for a couple of weeks, probably to really make sure that the exorcism had been successful. And then they moved back to Maryland. Roland grew up to get married and have kids. Father Bowden actually officiated his wedding, and he went on to have a very successful career as a scientist. Like, he worked for years for NASA. He never again suffered any ordeals like what he had as a young boy, and he went on to live a full life. He lived to his 80s before he sadly passed away last year in 2020. And his identity, like I said, was kept secret for a really long time, which is surprising because there was a lot of talk. Remember at the beginning when I said the neighbors could hear Roland during the night screaming and barking and all of that? And then there was all the shenanigans at the school. Like, there was talk, and Roland's exorcism actually made headlines. There was a newspaper article published in the Washington Post in 1949. And like we already said, this was William Peter Blatty's first introduction to the case. He was a college student at the time at Georgetown University, and he cut out the article because it caught his attention, and then he held on to the clipping for 20 years until he finally started writing his novel, The Exorcist. While he was writing the book, Blatty actually reached out to Father Bowden, but Bowden was like, no comment. I just request that you keep Roland's true identity secret. You keep it protected. And so Blatty then went and got his hands on a copy of the diary kept by Father Bishop, and this was his main inspiration for The Exorcist. When the book was released in 1971, it was immensely successful. It sold over 13 million copies in just the US alone. And of course, the movie deals started rolling in, and Blatty snatched up an offer from Warner Brothers, and the rest is history. The Exorcist went on to be the highest grossing R-rated horror movie of all time until It came out in 2017. The movie was also the first horror film nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture, and to be honest, it quite literally changed Western society at the time. Suddenly, everyone went from being barely aware of demons and demon possessions to being riveted by it, and the requests for exorcisms just skyrocketed all around the country. When it comes to final thoughts, I have mixed feelings, like just in life in general, but specifically when it comes to this story. So here's the things that I personally am sure of. Number one, something very intense was going on with Roland, something so intense and scary that his parents were willing to just pack up their lives and move halfway across the country with no real plan, just desperately hoping that it would help. Two, I do believe that an exorcism took place on Roland. And three, I believe that the events that occurred during this exorcism were terrifying enough to inspire the scariest movie of all time. Everything else, like, I just don't know. I have questions about the diary itself. It's a little bit flawed in that Bishop isn't really clear in like who saw what, and a lot of it is relayed to him by other people. He wasn't actually there at the time. And there's also apparently different versions of this diary. Like some people say it's 16 pages long, other people say it's 29 pages long. It's supposed to be really hard to get your hands on it, but I found the 29-page version pretty easily online. As for whether Roland was really possessed, like my stance on demon possession is this really strange mix of very strong skepticism and almost perverse fascination. Like the demon possession genre in horror is my favorite. I am obsessed, but I constantly jump between, oh my God, that is terrifying, to there is no way that actually happened. And to be honest, that's how I feel about this story. Like reading the diary and seeing that Roland wasn't necessarily really speaking Latin, he was just mimicking the priests. Some of the scratches that appeared on his body spelled out no school, and him surviving off pretty much just ice cream over the 5 weeks that the exorcism took place over. I just don't know how much more angsty 13-year-old boy you could get. Most of me feels like Roland was just dealing with the loss of his Aunt Tilly, that he didn't want to go to school, he just wanted to stay home and eat ice cream. So I'm like, no, he was just acting out and dealing with his grief. But then there's this interview with Father Halloran. I'll put a link in the description below. And firstly, he's this very sweet, down-to-earth man. And then when he's asked these dramatic, like sensational questions about the exorcism, like, did Roland really speak in one of those deep, scary demon voices? He's like, no, not at all. He also describes the nose-breaking incident, and he's like, it was an accident. I got in the way. I don't, he's just so nice. But then in the same interview, Halloran, this man who clearly doesn't buy into the whole drama surrounding Roland's story, talks about how this bottle of holy water flew through the air, damn near hitting him in the head, and also about how he personally witnessed Roland's bed levitating off the floor. Like hearing him talking about these experiences hits harder for me than the diary itself. But then as much as I have called the legitimacy of the diary into question, there are upwards of 40 witnesses who have signed their names confirming the events as they occur in that diary. So I don't know. Maybe the diary is legit. In the end, I feel like Roland's story is best summed up by the author Mark Obsasnik, who did his own deep dive into the case. And the conclusion he came to was that to psychiatrists, Roland Dahl suffered from mental illness. To priests, this was a case of demonic possession. To writers and film/video producers, this was a great story to exploit for profit. Those involved saw what they were trained to see. Each purported to look at the facts, but just the opposite was true. In actuality, they manipulated the facts and emphasized information that fit their own agendas. But as usual, I would love to hear what you beautiful people think. Crazy story, am I right? I know it was a bit different for us. It wasn't true crime. I hope that's okay and that it wasn't too scary. Do you think that Roland was legitimately possessed by a demon or the devil or something else? Or are you a bit more skeptical like I am? We can continue this hangout in the comments down below and we can all discuss. Also, let me know if you would like another Halloween-esque video this month, or if you are just sick of all the Halloween content everywhere and you're just like, Liz, can we please just do normal true crime? Like Halloween doesn't even exist. Let me know. Lily, you gonna come say bye? Come on. They're over there. You're gonna say hi? You're doing really good ghost sounds today, aren't you? Yeah. Speak. Good girl. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and Lily Girl today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, remember to let me know by giving it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe so that you and me can be best friends forever. And I just hope you have the best week ever. Me and Lily, of course, will be counting down the hours until we see you in the next one. Bye.